India is being redefined, not just by wealth, but by aspiration, digital-first behaviors, and a growing appetite for personalized premium experiences. And it's no longer confined to metros. From Tier B towns to emerging urban centers, a new generation of experience-driven consumers is reshaping the luxury playbook. In this episode of Media Dialogues with Storyboard18, we speak with Sandeep Ghosh, Group Country Manager, Visa India and South Asia, to understand the evolving mindset of India's affluent class, what this means for a company like Visa, and how innovation in digital payments is unlocking seamless, borderless experiences for this ambitious and upwardly mobile segment. Hello and welcome to the studio, Sandeep. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
So, Sandeep, let's get straight into it, and let me ask you, we talk about this new growing class of consumers, affluent, aspirational, all of these adjectives that we use for them. From where you're sitting as, the group country head for Visa, tell me what you are noticing. Tell me some of the sort of the big behavioral shifts and trends that you use then to inform your strategies.
Great question. So a few things that I would call out. One, I'm sure you've read all the sort of reports about how India's got this sort of new emerging group of affluent consumers, the rising high net worth individuals, numbers of high net worth individuals. Some of the studies talk about the fact that India has the third largest number of billionaires in the world now. We also, very interestingly, thanks to the startup ecosystem and thanks to a number of companies going public, have 1 out of 5 billionaires in this country are below the age of 40. This is quite an interesting factoid from my perspective. The third very interesting aspect is that the democratization of affluence. So the affluent Indian is no longer restricted to the tier 1 cities. Of course, there's a vast number of people in the tier 1 cities, but increasingly we are finding a number of India's new affluent and emerging affluent coming from the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. In fact, the number of new emerging affluent people come from cities like Ludhiana, cities like Agra, cities like Coimbatore. So it's not just, the 4 or 5 major metros in the country. When we look at spending on credit cards, in the period between 2019, 2020, sort of the pre-COVID era to 24, 25, more recently, the growth of affluent spending in the tier 2 and 3 cities has been about 4x, whereas the growth from the tier 1 cities is about 1.5x. So not only are a lot of people coming from these cities, but the sheer growth in card spends, we typically look at how many people are spending more than, say, 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs a year on their credit cards, and a lot of that growth is coming from tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Now talking about, again, behaviors and talking about what are these customers really looking for. Now, naturally, in digital payments, including cards, you want reliability, you want security, you want something that works everywhere all the time. But above and beyond that, people are also looking increasingly not just for rewards, but experiences, privileges, access, and benefits that are curated and really address their aspirations. So there's a lot going on in this space, and there's a fundamental structural shift happening in terms of this whole democratization of affluence.
Absolutely. And I'll come to some of the points that you mentioned on what these consumers are essentially looking for, that kind of privilege that comes with that piece of plastic in people's hands. But let me just talk a little bit about the Indian consumer psyche here, because it's very interesting, the shift that you mentioned, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic credit card usage. We weren't exactly a nation of credit card users. It's not in our, whatever you want to call it, mentality, psyche. Tell me what you have noticed about that shift. What made that shift happen, where people are more open to using credit cards, open to the idea of using a credit card? What did you notice? What led to that growth, that shift?
So there are a number of factors at play. I think first and foremost, there is use of cards in the domestic environment. There's use of cards when people travel overseas. The second sort of nuance is whether you are using the card in a face-to-face transaction, or are you using the card in an online transaction, which is something that we in industry parlance call card not present. But all that it means is that it's not a face-to-face transaction. So if I talk firstly about domestic versus international, over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a significant expansion in terms of the acceptance points, in terms of the number of merchants, businesses, establishments that actually accept digital payments and accept cards. Now, obviously, the acceptance of digital payments is even higher thanks to the QR code, which has become pretty ubiquitous in the country. But besides the QR code, the sheer number of acceptance points for cards on the back of the point of sale terminals, and now an increased proliferation of low-cost acceptance devices has increased dramatically. When it comes to international, and we all know the facts around how more and more Indians are traveling overseas for business, for leisure, for studies, and so on and so forth. So when you travel internationally in many jurisdictions and geographies, notably Western Europe, Australia, North America, card is the primary way to pay. So when you're traveling overseas, you have pretty much no choice but to use digital payments, and within digital payments, cards are fairly ubiquitous, right? Take for example, if you're in the UK, today in any form of transport, the metro, the tube, it's all tap and pay.
Yes.
If you go to a supermarket, it's all self-checkout. And earlier, those self-checkout machines had the option of paying by cash or card, and today you don't even have that option. So from a duty-free store to a supermarket to the London metro, in many major destinations, tourist destinations of the world, digital payments have become the norm, and within that, cards are the most popular way to pay. So if you're looking at people traveling overseas, they're getting used to not just card, but also to the notion of contactless payments, mobile contactless payments, and so on and so forth. In the domestic context, there is more acceptance of cards and broader, more broadly speaking, even greater acceptance of digital payments through different form factors. The other aspect is e-commerce. E-commerce today, when we look at credit card payments, more than 60% of all payments that happen through a card actually happen in non-face-to-face transactions. So whether it is people buying on Amazon, whether it's people ordering food on Swiggy and Zomato, or buying on any of these other marketplaces and e-commerce platforms, that's now become, again, so widely prevalent. And this is not, by the way, a phenomenon that is, again, restricted to the top cities. These marketplaces and platforms have proliferated across the length and breadth of the country. Virtually 95% of the PIN codes in India, products are getting delivered. So again, people have become very comfortable with the idea of cards and digital payments on these marketplaces, on these e-commerce platforms. And these digital payments is a function of habit.
Right.
The more you do it, the more you get comfortable. One of the good things with card-based payments is also that we have a very evolved mechanism for disputes, chargebacks, grievance redressal. So it's not like if you make a transaction on a card, once you made the payment, it's all over. If then, goods and services don't get delivered, you do have the ability to get back in touch with your bank and say, this has not been delivered, and therefore you can dispute that. And as a network, we have very clear rules on how to address situations like that, which are largely exceptions, not the rule, but we have a mechanism to address that. So yes, there has been a significant shift that has happened in the last 5 or 6 years. Overall adoption of digital payments, and within that, the growth of cards per se. Having said all that, penetration of credit cards in India is still, relative to our population and relative to the number of people who are eligible for cards, is still relatively low. In a country of 1.4 billion, we have about 110 million credit cards. And more importantly, only about 50 million unique credit card holders. So there are, we reckon, about 100 or 150 more people, million people who are credit eligible, but don't necessarily have a credit card. So that's a huge opportunity.
And what eligible but don't have a card? Why is that?
So there are a variety of reasons. We do have a challenge in India in terms of information asymmetry. Like, not everyone who is necessarily credit worthy are able to satisfy the requirements of banks to get a credit card, because credit card at the end of the day is a form of an unsecured loan. Banks need to be comfortable before they give you a credit card. And this becomes particularly the case with self-employed. So, banks are more comfortable underwriting people who have a steady source of income, said differently, a salary, versus people who are self-employed. And you know that India as a country, we are actually a nation of self-employed people.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
So we've come a long way in terms of credit bureaus and the availability of quality information, which should help banks and institutions underwrite more credit. But if I may say so, the kind of democratization we have seen of digital payments, where pretty much today 350 million, 400 million people, give or take, participate in digital payments in some form or shape. We haven't quite seen that same level of democratization when it comes to credit and responsible credit. So we have some journey to traverse in that arena. And, China, for example, roughly the same population, has 10 times the number of credit cards that we have. Brazil, a much smaller country in terms of population or GDP, has maybe 4 times the base of credit cards that India has. So we have some distance to cover, and it's a function of the availability of good quality data, and therefore, how institutions are able to underwrite, and particularly when it comes to the self-employed segment.
I don't want to get into this payment versus another kind of payment, but there's also been a lot of recently, and this is maybe from personal experience as well, there's been a lot of chatter, of course, on social media on the use of credit card versus the use of other kinds of digital payments, and not leaving money on the table. When we talk about good quality access, of course, but we also need to talk about good quality information and awareness. Anything that you, as the head of Visa, and is there something that you think about in terms of converting more users, convincing more users to, apply for a credit card or get a credit card if they're eligible to do so?
Right. So look,
or use the card that they have a lot more.
Right. Yeah. So there's a couple of aspects to your question, really. One is the fact that, look, we're a large country, large population, and there are a number of use cases for digital payments.
Sure.
Right? The primary objective of the country, the government, the regulator, as well as companies like Visa, is to displace cash, right? So as a company where credit and cards is core to our business, we don't see other companies or other forms of payment, digital payment, as competition. Our real competition is cash, right? And what we really want to do is to participate in this journey that our country is on, meaningfully and thoughtfully in displacing cash. And we may never become a cashless country, but a less cash country is a great outcome for India. And that's the journey that we are committed to. Now, because of we are not homogeneous, because of the size, because of the complexity, because of the different use cases for digital payments, it is absolutely essential that as a country, we have different forms and methods of digital payments that are available to the consumer. And we very genuinely believe that we should give the consumers a choice in terms of which form of digital payments they want to adopt for which use case.
Absolutely.
Right? And then when it comes to Visa, today we play in debit cards, credit cards, prepaid cards, commercial cards, which is more for B2B payments. But we also work in partnership with institutions, and we have the rails to support payments where it involves a wallet, an account, or a card. And think of it this way, you could actually have money moving from a card wallet or account and moving to a card wallet or account. And we are a network, we provide the rails, and at some level we are kind of agnostic. So yes, traditionally we are associated with cards, and credit cards is just one type of card. But increasingly, our business over the last decade or so is rapidly evolving, where we are supporting multiple forms of digital payment in different geographies across the world, some on our own rails and some in partnership and collaboration with other players. So really, like I said, one, we're all in the business of displacing cash, which is good for the country, which is good for the consumer, which is good for businesses, because cash transactions come at a cost, and often that hidden cost is not visible to everybody. And secondly, as a network, we are increasingly becoming agnostic as to whether the card is the primary form factor or not. We're kind of broad basing our solutions to support cards, account-to-account payments, wallets, etc.
Absolutely. Let me switch tracks a little bit now, Sandeep, and go to something that launched not too long ago, the Visa Infinite campaign. Featuring, of course, a young superstar, Vicky Kaushal. Tell me a little bit about the genesis of that campaign featuring Vicky Kaushal. What were you thinking? What do you hope it will achieve? And how have you seen it fare in the market? Again, it addresses that affluent class of consumers that you're looking to unlock. What are your objectives from it, and how are you seeing it fare so far?
Great. So, Vicky Kaushal is our first Bollywood brand ambassador. Super excited to have him as our brand ambassador, because we really feel that his persona really fits with our brand. And you would have seen the recent campaign. We have these 3 films that we made with Vicky, where we highlight bespoke travel, dining, and lifestyle privileges. And Visa Infinite is actually our top tier offering, which is designed to cater to the growing Indian affluent population. Because with this Infinite card, we actually have a range of luxury experiences, privileges, and benefits that we offer. We have a very strong, like a concierge proposition. There's a slew of benefits from dining benefits and meet and assist services. We have tie-ups with hotels, ITC and Elevas, and so on and so forth. So it's a very strong value proposition from Visa as a network over and above what the banks offer as part of their customer value proposition. So typically in a card, you have a host of benefits coming from the bank.
Right.
And then on top of that, we have a host of benefits coming from Visa. And when you put the two together, it's really what makes for the ultimate consumer value proposition. And so, yeah, the recent campaign with Vicky has done extremely well for us. And we are super excited to have him as a brand ambassador. I mean, we do have a number of sporting icons like Neeraj Chopra and PV Sindhu in India, and we have a number of global sporting icons associated with the brand. But Vicky is our first Bollywood brand ambassador, and we are really delighted to have him.
Yeah, you have to have a little bit of Bollywood in the mix, right? Always.
You know, no substitute for sports, movies, and music in India. So that was a missing box that we ticked with Vicky.
Absolutely. But let me dig into your point about experiences, and increasingly what we are seeing, of course, this intense hyper personalization, of course, digitally driven as well, but also offline experiences. And that's becoming increasingly important to this exact consumer that you are talking about. How are you approaching that? All these insights that you're gathering on your consumer, how is that feeding into some of the experiences that you curate and provide to your customer base as part of the proposition?
Right. So it's a journey that we are on. Like I said, there's a bunch of things that we do standalone as a network for Visa consumers, but there's also increasingly a number of things that we do in partnership with our bank partners and or our merchant partners. One of the very interesting things that has also played out in India is the proliferation of co-brand cards.
Yes.
And say about a decade ago, 1 in every 10 cards in India was a co-brand card. And today, it's almost 1 in every 3 cards is a co-brand card. And what these co-brand cards also do is it kind of plays to that whole personalization thing. And let me give you a few examples. So if I'm a frequent traveler and I'm flying to different parts of the world, I am very likely to go in for an airline co-brand and or a hotel co-brand. However, if I'm someone who shops a lot on these e-commerce marketplaces, I might choose to have a co-brand with Amazon or any of these marketplaces. So depending on what are my personal preferences, how do I what do I do most frequently? I might pick a certain co-brand card. But going a step further, the personalization and the hyper-personalization manifests in many, many other ways as well. So, we recently launched Visa Infinite Privilege with one of the banks. It's Axis Bank, and we launched the Primus card. And this is absolutely the top-end card offering that we have from Visa in the market. And we had consumers calling up saying, look, we want a reservation in a Michelin star restaurant in XYZ city. And we got one request where a consumer actually wanted a restaurant reservation where they could take a small baby along. So, the concierge had to identify a restaurant that would, a Michelin star restaurant in an international city that would actually,
allow
a baby, right? So, there is no limit to personalization and hyper-personalization. And like I said, there are times when people want something very specific, and it doesn't matter what that might cost. They're not worried about that. So this is not a typically reward kind of proposition. This is a proposition about curated, personalized experiences, something that someone wants. You would have read about or heard about that whole excitement that was there in the country about getting tickets to Coldplay, right? So a whole bunch of people did manage to get hold of Coldplay tickets in India, but there's a bunch of people who didn't. And what was very surprising in a way was that when Coldplay played in Abu Dhabi, we saw a huge surge in Indian issued cards being used in Abu Dhabi. And clearly what had happened was a large number of people from Mumbai had traveled to Abu Dhabi for the Coldplay concert or gone to Singapore for the Taylor Swift concert. And again, you know, so if you as a card network and or a bank are able to provide your high net worth affluent customers with access to a concert or a restaurant or a Formula One race or tickets to the FIFA World Cup or the Olympics, that really becomes a very, very special reason to want to be a Visa customer, to be affiliated with that card for life, you know, to have that as top of wallet at all times. So this is very much, again, part of the bouquet of offerings that we have. And like I said, all of this is always delivered by us through the network as well as in partnership with our banking partners.
It's all about that access. It's all about getting that privilege first, preferably. But tell me this, let's talk a little bit about technology and, you know, how are you leveraging new technology? Of course, I mean, when we talk about artificial intelligence, we tend to think of it as a new technology, but it's not. We've been talking about generative AI a lot more now, but AI, of course, has been working at the back end for a very long time. But how has this acceleration in emerging technologies, how is that perhaps helping you innovate? Whether it is, you know, delivering those hyper-personalized experiences online, offline, technology helping you, you know, shape your product strategies and all of it. Give me a few examples of how that is getting embedded in Visa.
That's a great question. So I think, look, first and foremost, at Visa, we firmly believe that we're arguably the world's oldest fintech, right? We've been around for nearly 60 years. We operate in 200 plus countries. And every time you pull out a card to make a payment, whether online or offline, the expectation is that it works. And we measure ourselves to, you know, 99.69% resilience, but really it's 100% uptime that is sort of the North Star for us. Because the expectation of the consumer is the card works everywhere, all the time, right? We've been in this country for over 40 years, and we believe, again, we have a huge role to play in India's digital transformation journey. And technology is such a vital ingredient of that. You know, think about contactless payments, think about biometric in payments, think about tokenization, and now increasingly leveraging AI or generative AI and most sophisticated machine learning tools to also combat fraud, which is a huge challenge when it comes to trust in digital payments. Last but not the least, I'm sure you know, you've also been reading about agentic commerce and how that could change the way people buy and shop in the course of time. So let me start by saying, one, since you spoke about AI, you know, we've been kind of working with artificial intelligence and machine learning for the last 20, 30 years. Over the last 5-6 years, we've invested north of $10-12 billion in enhancing network security, because you know, that's kind of table stakes for us. And in a sort of 12-month span, we prevented nearly $40 billion of fraudulent activities on our network or on the platform of partners with whom we work. So when it comes to fraud prevention, when it comes to security, it's absolutely integral to how we run our network, and we are deeply committed to combating this. And AI and fraud prevention go very closely hand in hand. And we have a number of tools, and without getting into technicalities, which we offer to banks, we offer to merchants, we offer to our ecosystem partners, so that we can actually prevent fraud on digital payment networks and platforms. The other aspect of leveraging technology, as you rightly called out, is in how you personalize your products and solutions, or how you innovate to make payments even more frictionless, even more intuitive, even more convenient to consumers. So, if you think about it, contactless payments, which is either card contactless or increasingly mobile contactless, is becoming very popular. We think that millennials and Gen Z will actually not really want to carry a physical card, plastic or metal, in their wallets or bags. It's going to be all credentials saved on the phone, with authentication which is likely to be biometric. It could be a retina scan, it could be a fingerprint, it could be various forms of authentication. And we just see contactless payments as being the future. So we already see a lot of that in many countries. The infrastructure for that in India is still evolving. Yes. And once that infrastructure is in place, we will see very rapid adoption. We believe that when players like Apple Pay enter a particular country or market, there is an immediate surge in adoption of contactless payments and mobile contactless, and that is likely to happen in India in due course. It hasn't happened yet. So absolutely, I think to summarize, technology has a vital role to play in everything that we do in digital payments. For Visa, this is absolutely center of plate. Within that, there is that element of having a strong platform and foundation that makes payments safe and secure, where technology plays a huge role. And then there is a second aspect of making payments seamless, frictionless, very intuitive, mobile first, and that's again something that you see a lot of technology. Last but not the least, when it comes to campaigns, offers, everything that we spoke about around hyper-personalization, right. Look, tech has again got to play a huge role in that. And that is again anchored in data and analytics and contextual offers. Gone are the days when you have a standard offering and everybody wants that. Today, like we were saying earlier, if I'm into dining, I would like dining offers, right. But also I would like those offers to come to me when I'm thinking about going and making a restaurant booking, not, at a random point in time in the day. So how do you make your offers very, very sharp in terms of targeting, but also very contextual in terms of when does the consumer actually want to receive that offer? All of that wouldn't work if it wasn't for great technology and data and analytics, and we invest massively in that. And again, it's all delivered in partnership with banks and our partners.
Right. So precise personalization in addition to hyper-personalization in that context, very critical. But because you mentioned safety and security, let me just ask you this. For the Indian consumer today, the credit card consumer, the card consumer, whoever's, your customer, for that consumer, what is the most important? We spoke about security and safety, but is that the case also for Indian consumers? Is that absolute top priority when it comes to payment mechanisms? What is happening right now?
So there's a few things here I'd like to call out. One, I think we are really fortunate that we have a very, very proactive regulator who takes safety and security in all forms of digital payments very, very seriously. India is one of the few countries in the world which mandated tokenization. In simple terms, any card credential that you use, when you use that at a merchant, the 16-digit PAN number or the card number is no longer stored at the merchant. And we actually use tokens to enable those transactions. And thanks to this mandatory tokenization, thanks to two-factor authentication, which are all initiatives of the regulator in India, we have, relatively speaking, one of the most secure payment infrastructures in the country. Now, having said that, there are still bad actors who look to have, unsuspecting consumers compromise their passwords, PINs, credentials, and, commit fraud.
Right.
And therefore, there is no substitute to financial literacy, to educating customers. A lot of banks and networks like us undertake initiatives to make sure that consumers understand the do's and don'ts when they adopt digital payments. And so it's an evolving space, but we do believe and we feel quite good about the fact that we have a very proactive regulator, and we work closely with the ecosystem and the regulator to continuously look at ways and means of doing the education on the one hand, but also providing a more secure ecosystem so that the barriers to this kind of fraud and activity, fraudulent activity are the highest.
And I mean, we do have a sense of security, therefore, when we go in for other payment methods as well. But one final closing question for you, Sandeep, and looking ahead, and of course you mentioned that exponential growth we'll likely see when we get to that point in this country. If you could just put a timeline in place, or just your outlook on when that will happen, what will it take for that to happen? Maybe your closing statements on that as we become an even more aspirational economy.
Yeah. So if I put a business lens to it, right? Number one, we are fortunate to be in a country which is seeing north of 6.5% GDP growth, right? So there aren't too many economies in the world which have a prognosis to grow for the next decade or two at north of 6.5%, despite all the macro headwinds and uncertainties that the global economy faces today. So there's an underpinning growth momentum and story in India, regardless of everything else that is happening. On top of that, like I mentioned earlier, despite India being at the forefront of digital payments, the evolution of digital payments infrastructure, the kind of rapid adoption of digital payments, cards and other forms post-COVID, we are still a 50-55% cash economy. Right. Which means that there is significant cash displacement opportunity in this country, north of $1.6 trillion of cash that can get displaced by digital payments over the next 5-10 years. The other thing that is, again, very exciting about this country is that, like I said, we have 110 million cards out there, credit cards out there, nearly 1 billion debit cards, but merely 50 million people who are unique credit card holders. So there's 150 million people who can be carded in the next 3 to 5 years. So there's room to displace cash, there's room to democratize credit or responsible credit. Now, beyond this, when it comes to B2B payments, when it comes to government payments, there are again significant opportunities for digitization and efficiency. Last but not the least, the cross-border money movement, both inbound into India and outbound, also has a lot of friction. It is anything but transparent, and it is expensive.
Right.
So you have high cost, opacity, and friction. So when we look at business opportunities for a company like ours, there's consumer payments with cash displacement, credit expansion. Right. There's B2B and government payments and commercial money movement. There's international cross-border money movement inbound and outbound. And last but not the least, there's a whole host of value-added services in the area of data, analytics, AI, fraud and risk management. So the opportunities are vast, and then you've got this country growing at 6.5% or north of that for the next decade or two. That's a huge opportunity for us, and that's what excites us about doing business in this country.
Maybe we'll see more campaigns as well coming soon. Anything you can share with us?
Well,
what's happening, going to come next?
Yeah, so the campaigns we are working on, we will continue doing more of that, but we are also looking forward to 2026, which is again going to be the year of FIFA. This time it's happening in North America, and then there's the next Olympic cycle. There's Formula One, where we have a sponsorship program. So that's on the sports front. Right. There's a lot of things we are doing with gaming and music. So yeah, I mean, we are going to amplify a whole host of properties in due course.
And what are you particularly upbeat about in terms of these properties and their potential? You mentioned gaming, for instance, and we're seeing how important it is becoming as an industry in the country. The Prime Minister himself has even met with gaming influencers on multiple occasions. Is that a space that you're seeing particularly ripe opportunity there?
Absolutely, and again, when the time is appropriate, we'll sort of be talking more about some of the initiatives and partnerships we are going to bring to life in this market. But you're absolutely right. The whole sort of gaming ecosystem is something that we as a company are tracking very closely. We have some very unique properties that we will promote in that space as well, and partnerships that we will promote. But it is a very exciting space, and fundamentally, again, if we want to be relevant to millennials and Gen Z, we've got to be in the platforms where they're spending a lot of their time. So
sport, music, gaming.
Precisely. So gaming is very much part of that sort of bouquet of things that Gen Z and millennials spend a lot of time on. So it's an area of interest to us as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Sandeep. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Same here. Wonderful talking to you.